and welcome everyone to the 16th edition of your city's literary festival. It's called Literature Live, the Mumbai LitFest, never forget. So thank you for joining us on this warm and glorious Friday afternoon. Thank you. So when Anil Dharker, our founder, lunged into the idea of this festival, the rest of us, his team, we blindly followed, not quite knowing where this would take us. But his hard work bore fruit. And here we are today in 2025 with a LitFest that Mumbai loves and enjoys. A festival that shares the dynamics of the city itself. It's vibrant, it's exciting, and it's high on endless cups of chai. So over the years, it has attracted the world's best writers. Last year itself, we were blessed to have our hero, Jane Goodall, on this very stage with us. Yeah, she has moved on, as she put it, to her next great adventure. But we at Literature Live honor her memory at the Little Festival with the Roots and Shoots program that she championed. And this morning, at the Little Festival, Fazal Qureshi paid a tribute to his brother, Zakir Hussain, enthralling our young audiences with the sounds of the tabla. It was so fabulous, and seeing the reaction of these children to it, I won't be surprised if there are a few hundred little Zakirs spouting up all over the city. We love that the festival has turned into a celebration of not just ideas, but also inclusivity. Our speakers represent a sweep of identities, orientations, and abilities. And we cannot underscore enough the importance of having inclusivity and diversity in these trying times. As for equity, well, I'm delighted that our gender ratio at the festival favors women. So, yeah, men have a lot of catching up to do. We have a literary banquet lined up for you, and you're going to have to make some tough choices between the sessions you want to attend, simply because we have several venues holding simultaneous sessions, but all of these sessions are populated with brilliant authors and thinkers who we thank profusely for being with us today. Now, none of this would have been possible if it weren't for our partners who cherish culture. So thank you, Godrej Industries Group, for being the wind beneath our wings. Thank you, NCPA, for letting us call this our home. And we welcome Florentry into our fold, and we're grateful for their belief that the city deserves a great festival. Thank you. And so also to the so many people, Blue Star, Forbes, Heikel, the Maribalas, and all the others who've added to the success of this festival, a big thank you. I have so many more people to thank. Just bear with me for a few minutes. A huge thank you to our Literature Live team, who have once again pulled off an impressive lineup. And to everyone at QTP, a big thank you for producing this mammoth show. And finally, but not last but not the least, to our audience, we're thrilled that you demand more than just 280 characters and hashtags and reels in your reading habits. So this is really what keeps literature alive. And this is your city and your festival. Enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Amy. And now, to tap the bard inside of me, please bear with my poetry to introduce our next guest with use of verse. I'll try my best. He rhymes with reason, blends thought with play, turns molecule poetic in his own way. A scientist, a leader, a rhymester, all three, who proves that business can dance with poetry. With wit that sparkles and words that flow, he makes ideas sing wherever he goes. Please welcome with fervor and much zest, Mr. Nadir Godrej, our very special guest.
Everyone in the audience, beware. This is a confined space, and poetry is infectious. Bombay was where West met East, a veritable cultural feast. Much progress we could see thanks to the diverse society. A city of both trade and tide, from here merchants spread far and wide, many languages proliferated, great literature was curated. Mumbaikars often think aloud, feel comfortable in a crowd. For literature they deeply care, they need a place to meet and share. Many intellectuals who were bright got together and saw the light, a concept in which they all believed, and Literature Live was conceived. Now every flame has a sparker, and for Literature Live, it's Anil Dharker. The fest is now in its 16th year. For that, Anil deserves a cheer. Anil, alas, is now no more, but at this fest he abides for sure. Anil was a man of many parts, master of sciences as well as arts. In an age of specialists, it is strange to find a person with such a range. No matter how hard you scan, you won't find such a Renaissance man. An expert in the field of salt and a connoisseur of single malt. In every art he excelled. At NFDC he propelled Indian film to critical acclaim. Directors he promoted then made their name. Gandhi co-production added to his fame. He was an expert at the editorial game. His great legacy is Literature Live. We look to Amy to make it thrive. And now the Godrej Industries Group is very much in the loop. Creativity is the essential foundation to fuel purposeful innovation, and learning of every kind helps to build a curious mind. We readily gave our support since we liked the idea of nurturing thought. Eminent authors will be there. Profound insights they will share. There will be fun and exhilaration, as well as thoughtful inspiration. Good ideas from authors we will hear and collect books for the rest of the year. In a polarized world, some welcome sanity from inclusive sessions celebrating humanity. And Literature Live will inspire all of us to strive even higher. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Godrej. Your poetry always inspires and uplifts, and for being our unwavering friend so solidly over the years. This year, sir, I came prepared, though to your verse, I'm nothing compared. Just like all good friends, NCPA too has stood with Literature Live, the Mumbai LitFest, holding our hand and walking beside us steadfastly over the past 16 years. We now have the chairman of the NCPA, Mr. Khushru Santok, joining us for a few words.
And who can follow our Shakespeare? Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're great friends of Literature Live, and of course, my dear friend Anil, who created it all. Well, literature is a close cousin of the arts, and for 16 years, we had the pleasure of hosting this stimulating celebration of words on our campus. I still remember Anil sitting across me in my office, speaking of his vision for a literary festival for the city. We often talked about making literature a major force at the NCPA, its vital role in shaping opinion, its influence on values, and of culture as a soft power in making our population open to various schools of thought rather than one philosophy. Over the years, Anil invariably brought persons of great interest and stature, whose knowledge, eloquence, and unique points of view stirred many fascinating controversies and conversations. It is a tradition that Amy, Kassar, and their colleagues have devoutedly followed and devotedly emulated. And I must congratulate them on their success with the hope that they spread their wings even further. Anil Dharker session, which will open the festival, examines the pertinent topic of truth in our times, often a casualty. Literature and potential to shape opinions is a fact which we need to reacquaint ourselves. What a coincidence it is that we are inaugurating Literature Live on a day that commemorates the beginning of the Russian Revolution, one that was precipitated in no small measure by literature, by the great writings of Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and Gorky, and Russian theater, which powerfully convey the thoughts of Trotsky and Lenin, have shaken nations and altered, in many cases, the course of history. There is a joke about my asking one of my friends on my various visits to Russia, "What kind of theater do you have now?" He said, "We have the tragedy and the comedy. In the tragedy, everybody dies in the end. In the comedy also, everybody dies in the end, but they die happy." That is the nature of their character. We, and especially the younger people, must also perhaps be reminded of the edifying impact of philosophers such as Rousseau, Voltaire, and in our own way, Shakespeare and Dickens. The Emperor Akbar, who was considered one of the most enlightened monarchs of his period, sought inputs from the great minds of the world and was known to have sent his ships around Asia to Persia and to China and gathered great savants in his court in a time when communication was largely personal. I am sure that through Literature Live, our literary traditions will be guided by mature thoughts to shape the future of our country, based on a deep study and knowledge of our history and what needs to be changed from the errors of the past and the present. Incidentally, I must tell you an occasion when I first came to the NCPA. I entered my room, and there was dear Alec Padamsee sitting there. And he said, "Can I tell you how to run the NCPA?" I said, "Thank you. First of all, never start late." And that we have done today. Sorry, Alec. Thank you very much. And may I wish your wonderful performance and literature festival every success. Excuse my bad throat. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Santok, and the NCPA for always being by our side. This year, we're also hugely grateful to be powered by Florentry. Cornelia Funk said, "You can find friends between the pages of a book, wonderful friends, and a festival about books and literature doesn't get to celebrate 16 birthdays without its most steadfast friends. All of you, our unstintingly loyal audience, we are sincerely thankful to each and every one of you for supporting us in more ways than we can count. We are truly humbled by your loyalty, support, and patience." Take a round of applause for yourselves, please. Books may well be the only true magic. And to take us through what magic the festival holds for us this year, I'd like to call upon a dear friend, Artistic Director, QTP, and Co-Director of Literature Live, the Mumbai LitFest 2025, Quasar, or Q as he's best known to all of us.
Thank you, Meher. And welcome everyone to Literature Live, the Mumbai LitFest 2025. When we began putting this edition of the festival together, we really thought it was going to be smaller. But then our programming committee seems to have a voracious appetite for reading. And before we knew it, Antoine, Reena, Tina, and Shireen began trying to figure how one of the largest art centers in the country could add even more venues. Mr. Santok, I hope you're listening. There's a lot new this year. We have an increased focus on accessibility, and while it's only a drop in the ocean, it's something that we hope to build on in the years to come. And that's where partners like Godrej Industries Group come in. Through their DEI platform, they've enabled us to take steps in the right direction. They're small steps, but we're hoping they're going to be strides soon. We like to consider ourselves as a city's celebration of literature. And that's perhaps why we have so many partnerships happening with other local groups and initiatives. Our partnership with Avid is ongoing. This year, we also salute the winner from the Ladli Book Awards. And then there is the connection to Art Deco Alive, which is a commemoration of 100 years of that movement. So naturally, our book in focus for the year is The Great Gatsby, which also celebrates its 100th year anniversary. Then there is the Bhasha Center partnership, which takes us on a picnic with playwrights, and who, along with our other partners like the Pomegranate Workshop, Mumbai Bookies, and Poets of Mumbai, allow us to make our garden spaces come alive with performed readings, quiet readings, and open mic performances. The Children's Festival too this year, thanks to our collaboration with H.T. Parekh, has grown by leaps and bounds. As Amy just mentioned, we kicked off this morning with a wonderful tribute to Zakir Hussain, another dear friend of the festival whom we miss. And what's Literature Festival if you can't encounter brand new books? This year we have 11 new books being launched at the festival, from topics like the Constitution to palliative care to business to sensuality, and also a particular book that we would have been very upset if it had been launched anywhere else. And this is a book called The Only City, which is a collection of short stories by different writers that uses Mumbai as its muse. And then, of course, we have the debate this evening. India and China must be friends, which is sure to throw up some kind of heated arguments. And then we have our biennial quiz, literary quiz, which is a little more hilarious than heated. As always, there are performances. Rumination, on later tonight, talks about what it means to be a person in a world where all the things that you held true are changing. And then there's Here I Am, or And Here I Am, playing tomorrow and day after, which is an insight into what it is to be a Palestinian in this world. And then there's a special experiment where we're putting and locking 3 poets in a room, throwing in 2 other musicians, and saying, make something. And then you might also bump into a young group of people wandering around in most of the theaters, looking very officious and maybe taking notes. This is our Booksters program. And these are people kids rather, from the age of 11 to 18 who have been handpicked to be part of the Vatsala Chibba Booksters program. And they are readers that we want to encourage. This was named after Vatsala Chibba, who was a young writer, and her family, in her honor, want to continue that tradition of encouraging young writers and young readers. So all in all, there's a lot to do. And putting a festival to this is no mean task. And while I stand here, I am fully aware that I'm standing here on a pyramid of people who help prop us up. From our main partners like the Godrej Industries Group, NCPA, and Florentry, to the consulates who have helped us feature authors from Germany and Ireland and Italy and Norway and Taiwan, to our friends of the festival, who are never too far away for advice or recommendation, and sometimes a suggestion. To our advisory board, which consists of Akhil Gupta, Amitav Ghosh, Ramchandra Guha, Ranjit Hoskote, Salil Tripathi, Soumya Balsari, Shashi Tharoor, and Shobha De, and Siddharth Dhanwan Sangvi. And of course, to you, our audience, whose passion and fervor is the validation for the sleepless nights and the work we do. The other day, we were asked a question. In this new world of algorithms, what is the point of a literary festival? And I think in the question itself lies the answer. LitFests like ours are unalgorithmic. They are like immersive bookstores that let us scan ideas and topics, giving ourselves the opportunity to be surprised and to discover new subjects that we might not have otherwise encountered. So to everyone here, for the next 3 days, I wish you a happy browsing.
Thank you so much for that, Kwasar. May I please invite on stage Mr. Godrej, Amy Fernandez, Mr. Santok, and Mr. Matthew Syriac from Florentry to please open the festival by unveiling the brochure. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Godrej, Mr. Syriac, Mr. Santok, Kwasar, and Amy. And now, on to our very first session of Literature Live, the Mumbai LitFest 2025. As you must have seen in our opening film, this session is in honor of our founder and guiding light, Mr. Anil Dharker. And so, as we instituted 4 years ago, the first session of every edition of Literature Live, the Mumbai LitFest, will always be known as For the Love of the Word, the Anil Dharker session. This year, the session is called Truth, Trust, and Testimony. We live in a time where information is everywhere, on our screens, in our pockets, and sometimes even shouting at us from across the room. We scroll, we click, we react, and somewhere in that constant stream, we're asked to decide what's real. Once upon a time, truth felt simple. Facts were facts, end of story. But today, truth doesn't stand still. It shifts as we learn more, as technology evolves, and as countless perspectives compete for our attention. In an online world where anyone can publish, post, or proclaim, how do we sort meaningful insight from noise? How do we recognize truth when it's surrounded by imitation? Today, we explore that very question. We're joined by 3 remarkable thinkers, a Nobel laureate, a Booker Prize-winning author, and a professor who studies the digital age and its impact on communication. Together, they will help us navigate this landscape where facts, beliefs, and stories collide. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest to the stage for this year's Anil Dharker session for the love of the word, Truth, Trust, and Testimony. Our first speaker is a psychologist, author, and professor of digital communication at Hamburg University of Applied Sciences. A longtime Der Spiegel columnist and former head of its web, tech, and media desk, his best-selling work examines how digital transformation, climate realities, and global power networks shape our future. Please welcome Christian Stöcker. Our next guest is a writer whose imagination travels effortlessly across genres, from award-winning novels and short stories to children's books and screenplays. His novel, The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, earned the 2022 Booker Prize, adding to a growing list of international accolades. Besides the 2012 Commonwealth Book Prize he had won for Chinaman, The Legend of Pradeep Matthew. His storytelling reaches readers in more than 30 languages, and even the world of cinema has called on his talents. Please welcome Shehan Karunatilaka. Our next speaker is a scientist whose work literally changed our understanding of life at its most fundamental level. He decoded how the ribosome, the cell's protein factory, operates, a breakthrough that earned him the 2009 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. He has led one of the world's oldest scientific institutions as president of the Royal Society, and his journey spans 3 continents, from India to the United States and now to Cambridge in the UK, where he continues his research as a group leader at the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology. He's also a best-selling author, opening the world of science to readers through his books Gene Machine and Why We Die. Please join me in welcoming Nobel laureate Venki Ramakrishnan. Our dapper chair for this afternoon is a writer, translator, and curator whose work bridges literature, art, and public policy. A Rhodes Scholar and national spokesperson for the NCP-SP, he is also the founder of Pink List India, championing inclusion and LGBTQ+ rights in Indian politics. Please put your hands together for Anish Gawande. My God, Anish, lots of fans in the audience, lots of woos.
A very generous and very kind introduction. Thank you very, very much. And for all those hoots and cheers, I hope all of you are going to be voting in elections as well. But, you know, when Antoine first asked me whether I would moderate this session, I said, of course. And then I realized that I would be on stage with a Nobel laureate, a Booker Prize winner, and one of the world's experts on information. And I said, I'll do what most logical people will. I shaved my beard off, said I'm going to look 5 years younger, and then everyone in the audience can wonder, what is this lovely young gentleman doing, and how smart is he that he can be in conversation with all these very intelligent people? So I am going to try today, in a session on truth, trust, and testimony, to bring together 3 diverse perspectives to piece apart the information ecosystem that we find ourselves living in, and to really sort of tease out these 3 concepts to examine how do we navigate what is being thrown at us, and how do we sort of examine the various sources of information that are coming our way. I want to begin with a small anecdote to sort of highlight this. You know, I've been working in politics for more than a decade now, and in 2014, I remember when I was a young student working on a political campaign, the most important information was on the front page of the Times of India. At that point, general consensus was the front page of the Times of India has the biggest headlines. In 2019, by the time I was running an election campaign for an MP here in South Mumbai, you had Twitter trends. And suddenly, every couple of hours, what was the most important news for the day was changing, and that determined 9 p.m. primetime TV debates, which I now unfortunately have to speak on. By 2024, we live in a completely fragmented information ecosystem. If we ask 5 people here today what the biggest headline for today is, I'm sure we'll have 5 incredibly different answers. So at a time of fragmentation, when what we perceived of as the mainstream is crumbling in front of us, when all of the institutions that we built painstakingly for centuries, if not just decades, are sort of wobbling? What does it mean to restore faith in the idea of the truth? And with that, I want to begin with you, Venki, and I want to sort of lead with this question, right? Truth is not something that came naturally, right? It's something we fought long and hard for. It's something that your institution has played a pivotal role in establishing as different from perception or someone's opinion. What is the truth?
Well, I think we've always had an intuitive understanding of what is real and what is not real, but that's a very subjective feeling. And I think what changed, perhaps starting in the 1600s, it's not that science has existed for centuries, but modern science, which has had so great a success, is based on the idea that science does not depend on whether an idea is beautiful or whether it's advocated by somebody who's very important and famous, but rather it has to meet the test of experiment. That is, it has to be empirically tested. And you could argue, well, what does that mean? Well, I would say what that means is before you know the answer, you agree on a process. And you say, if we do this process and we get this result, then that we accept. It means that this idea has some validity. And I think that scientific method has really driven us forward in the last few hundred years. Now, you said that truth is increasingly fragmented. Just from the perspective of science, I would say, first of all, truth is not some subjective thing. I mean, often in the humanities, people talk about my truth versus your truth, and so on. In science and related disciplines, truth might be an ideal, but it's an objective ideal. Now, you said we live in an area where it's fragmented. It's always been the case in science that at the very frontiers, things are fuzzy. But there's a process to try to understand what's happening. For example, in the early 20th century, we didn't know, physics wasn't making sense, and people had all sorts of ideas about quantum mechanics, and they were arguing, and out of that emerged some consensus. Now, you could say, well, this is all a figment of the imagination, but remember, out of modern physics, which was purely based on theory, over 100,000 people died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay? So that shows you how closely tied it is to the real world. And so I would say science is, always groping towards the truth. And when it establishes something as a fact, then it moves on to the next frontier where it's again groping. But it's the process of getting there that's well established.
And I think that's an incredible way to think about it, right? That there is a method that we all agree on, and that method delivers results that we then hold as true.
Right.
Christian.
And that truth is always provisional in the sense if new information comes to light that disproves what you thought or extends what you thought, then you just incorporate that. You don't stick to, it's not a dogma, it's not a religion.
And we can expand upon idea of the truth, and it can become something that grows in some ways and sort of builds upon itself.
Right, and sometimes drastically changes as well.
Christian, what happens when you combine truth with the idea of trust? What happens when this truth is put out by a process we seemingly agree on, but when that information is put out, the trust in that information becomes integral? What are the institutions that uphold that trust? And what does trust mean in the context of truth?
Well, let me introduce another term into the conversation, and that's propaganda, right? So if you look at old manuals, Soviet manuals for propaganda from the 20s, even they contain the central tenet that the purpose of propaganda isn't necessarily for aggressive propaganda. Some of it is to convey ideas that you want your citizens to believe in. But another part, especially foreign propaganda, is the main goal is not to make believe something that is untrue. The goal is to undermine the idea that the truth can be known. And I think that is something that is, so and that this is undermining trust, basically. Undermining trust in the scientific process, for example, is something that we've been witnessing for decades when it comes to climate change, for example. I mean, there's this majorly important, if somewhat hard to read book, Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes, that sort of shows how, especially the oil and gas industry in the US, they paid people to undermine trust into the science of climate change. That is a major strategic way of getting what you want. In this case, continuing with a business model that destroys the planet, basically. If you look at propaganda in Europe right now that is trying to undermine trust in media institutions and governments, it's always the attempt to not say, believe this, but it's the attempt to say, don't believe that, and don't believe those people, and don't believe in the methods that they use. Everybody can have their own opinion on this. Like, if a concrete example, if I have the time. When MH17, a Malaysian airline plane, was shot down over Ukraine years ago. And we all know that there's conclusive evidence that it was a Russian missile that shot down the plane. And of course, Russia knew it right away because it was their missile. What RT, Russia Today, the Kremlin propaganda TV channels, did then wasn't to say, no, that didn't happen. They said it was a Ukrainian missile. It was a NATO plane. There was a bomb on board. There was a technical malfunction on board. They put out all these conflicting theories about what happened at the same time, more or less, to undermine the idea that it could ever come out what really happened, because they obviously knew. So undermining trust is the core principle, I would say, of most people who try to, and that ties in with the first question basically, who try to establish the truth and to try to get truth or facts across to people. So truth and trust, or facts and trust, are intertwined inextricably.
And in a strange way, there's an almost manufacturing of alternative facts to derode trust and to sort of question truth itself. So the attack on truth is an attack on the trust behind the truth. And it often happens in more organized ways, which we'll definitely get back to.
Precisely.
Shehan, I want to get to you and say what happens to individuals who are consuming all of this, right? What happens at a time when we are building our own truths for ourselves with empirical truths that we see around us. We're understanding and navigating our socio-political landscapes. We're understanding and navigating global events like the pandemic. We're also understanding and navigating our role within these sort of landscapes, right? You've written 7 Moons of Mali Almeida. You have a character who has incredibly strong conviction on matters that are incredibly complex. And he's arriving at certain truths where you know that he might not necessarily have the right interpretation of the events that unfolded. And quite honestly, he doesn't know what's happened to him for a large part as well. What happens to individual testimony, to one's own truth? I know you don't like the term. In such an information landscape?
Well, firstly, let me, I'd have to part company with most of you here because I tell lies for a living. So let's hear it for the liars, of which there are a lot of us among us here. But also, okay, I worked in advertising up till 5 minutes ago. I've been clean for many years, but occasionally I relapse, and advertising is about massaging various lies so that they are plausible enough for you to pull out your wallet. And writing fiction it's a weird counterpoint to that, because you're telling a lie. Yes, I haven't been to the afterlife, I haven't met a ghost, I haven't met demons, but here's this guy, and you're telling These lies, my first book was about how Sri Lanka won a World Cup, science fiction these days. But it happened. It is true. It was true. I don't know if anyone will believe it. But I wonder now, this example that you brought up of the Times, of the front page of the Times of India being the bastion of truth. And I remember when I was growing up, the evening news, my dad would make sure everyone was silent to watch the evening news because that's where the truth was. I wonder if this is another lie that we wrapped ourselves up in, this idea of this singular narrative. Because, and also, I also wonder if it's just the domain of us writers and artists. And I'm glad to have a Nobel laureate in chemistry, because I'm not sure if the sciences or commerce or business is immune to this. Because let me give you one personal example. I turned 50 this year. I know I look a lot older, but I was born in 1975, and I've had this thorny question of cholesterol and statins. And again, multiple truths there. My mom and my mother-in-law send me WhatsApp saying statins are evil, they'll give you cancer and AIDS and dementia, stay away from it. My doctors say it's a wonder drug, it's going to protect your kidneys, your heart, and everything. In between that...
Which of those is actually trained in human physiology? Okay?
Yes.
So,
my mom knows a lot, but okay. she knows more than... But in the end, and also within the medical, some doctors say, no, get free of all these substances. Some say it's keeping you alive. In the end, I have to literally put my heart on the line and figure out which truth that I accept.
Yes.
And
what did you do?
I'm still deciding. I'm still popping the... November 10th, I was told to take a 6-week holiday. Let's see, I'll update you before Christmas. But yeah, so now this is one example of science, chemistry being infallible.
I have to say, I had the same dilemma, and I opted for statin.
Okay, you're alive. Fine.
And your testimony will
Same
matter
here, by
more
the
than
way.
the truth.
I'm taking my status.
What's
You
that?
need to
Your
talk to my mom.
testimony.
You guys need to talk to my moms. But now another unfortunate side effect of winning a Booker Prize is I've had to deal with accountants and lawyers. Again, lawyers, okay, let's put them aside. We know about their relationship with the truth. But accountants, you think that is, it's numbers. Numbers do not lie. But these dudes are more creative than, especially when it comes to taxes, in bending these numbers to say something else. And Sri Lanka had an economic crisis recently, and I started going through, what does that mean? It's so abstract. Okay, we defaulted on a loan and now we're bankrupt. What does it mean? And the more I explored the words of finance, I realized, derivatives and options, this is fiction weaving that on a grand scale that we buy. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, you talk about testimony. Mali Almeida was convinced of a truth that he had taken photographs. The reason that the Sri Lankan war had carried on is that no one knew about it. And if his photographs were seen, the war would end. People would know the horrors and that would end. But I wonder, and without giving away how that turns out, he said, I want to take a photograph of the Sri Lankan war like the Napalm Girl for Vietnam. Now, the Napalm Girl, we all know that image. It won a Pulitzer Prize in 1971 or 1969, I think, after the My Lai massacre. But the fact is that did not stop that war. It carried on for another 6-7 years. And when Mali Almeida came out, it's set in '89, where perhaps that generation more idealistic and had more belief in the truth. We had the Aragalaya, which there were cameras everywhere. If someone wrote a novel about the Aragalaya, like what I found writing about the 80s, there weren't many photographs, but now there are photographs. Now we have documented evidence of slaughter, of massacres, of genocide, but is it stopping the war? Because everyone has their own narrative on that. And so I wonder, it's good for novels to show characters who have conviction, but I think also what I do in the editing process is I start taking out my convictions. I think my job is, if you do it well, is to present the various narratives. Because in Sri Lankan history, there are so many. There's so many narratives about the 1996 World Cup, about Murali. Is he the greatest bowler of all time, or is he a chucker? There's, again, heated arguments. Was he a good ambassador for the Tamil people, or was he a traitor? So I've been unraveling this. The first line of Chinaman is, if a liar tells you he is lying, is he telling the truth? And so I think I have to say, let's embrace the lie. I don't have any solutions for you.
Let's embrace the lie. I'm not going to be very happy about that.
I have no solutions for you, but I think all we can do is present the narratives as best we can.
But I want to stay with that emotion, right? I want to stay with that emotion, going back to your opinions on statins. And I want to turn to you, Venki. What happens when people don't want the truth? You know, what happens? You were the head of the Royal Society when the pandemic broke out.
Well, I think, it's human nature to pay more importance to trusted relationships and so on. And it's very, the scientific method of relying on sort of objective evidence when it doesn't have anything to do personally with you, it's a problem. It's human nature is very susceptible to what I call emotional, pulls, rather than this sort of dispassionate view of things. The thing about statins is, statins are complicated, but there's a very clear mechanism by how they work, but they do have side effects in a small number of people. And so, I think the medical community needs to simply be honest about that and say, look, and by and large they are, and say, look, the odds are it will help you. There's a very small chance that you may be one of the people that will experience a bad side effect, in which case you can stop it, okay? And so that's how it moves on.
But you say this as someone who believes in the scientific method, but you've also been in situations where you've had to communicate this to the public. And the pandemic is a great example.
Yeah,
right? With the vaccine, we had to say it's 100% safe, otherwise nobody would take it. And somewhere,
so
you
the
have to
pandemic,
make that
for
compromise.
example, the equivalent of climate change in pandemic was masks. Do masks work or not? And in the US, for example, it became extremely polarized, so that, it became a political view rather than a scientific view. So if you were right-wing, you felt that masks were a bad thing. It became a tribal thing rather than a scientific thing. So if you're a member of one tribe, you said, I'm not going to wear masks anywhere. And if you're the other tribe, you would say, I'm going to wear masks even when I'm walking around in the park, okay, when masks have there's no need to wear them. And so you had this extreme polarization of masks. And so, one of the things that I advocated was masks. And even among scientists, there was an argument, because they say, there are no randomized controlled trials showing that masks work. Well, there are cases where you can't do randomized trials. For example, surgeons wear masks when operating, but there has never been an experiment where they took 100 surgeons to operate without masks and 100 surgeons with masks and ask how many patients died, okay? So not everything, or the famous thing is, there are no randomized controlled trials for parachutes. and so, that's what I call a kind of, methods dogmatism about methods. The reason to suspect mass work is, physically they'll prevent droplets from penetrating. There are other ways in which you can believe that masks have a good chance to work. And, but they'll only work in a pandemic if everybody wears them. And so if you have even 20 or 30% who are not going to wear them, then the effect will very rapidly disappear, and then it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy that, oh, masks don't work. Okay, they don't work because you don't think they'll work, and you're not going to wear them. So you get that sort of complication, and that really played out in the pandemic quite a lot. And
often this tribalism, Christian, is not a flaw. It is by design. The information ecosystems we've created around ourselves encourage this kind of disinformation to spread more easily. So can you tell us a little more about what is it that makes this sort of anti-vaxxer sentiment or an anti-mask sentiment or a sort of very deeply held belief that goes against the science so alluring?
Well, in terms of identity is an important term that Venki just used. If you manage to create a situation where people say, it's part of my tribal identity to believe this, or not believe this, or not believe these people, that's very important as well, then you have a good chance of keeping people voting for you, basically. You know, as soon as you turn someone tribal, it's extremely difficult to get them away again from that kind of attitude. The most extreme examples are conspiracy theorists, right? Because that goes back to what we talked about before. A conspiracy theorist, when you present them with evidence, even if it's a photo, I encourage you to read this book, by the way. This is a marvelous piece of work. And evidence plays a major role in this tale of lies, basically, obviously. So evidence is a crucial thing. But a conspiracy theorist will, no matter what kind of evidence you will present, he or she will say, yeah, well, that's your evidence. You know, I don't believe your data. One of the most toxic quotes I think in the scientific arena is from, I'm not sure I'm back translating this correctly, I think it's by Winston Churchill, never believe a statistic you haven't faked yourself. that is something that conspiracy theorists love to quote. You know, so yeah, these are your facts, but I have my own facts. So that's one thing. The other thing is right now we all, how many of you, raise your hands, how many of you have received information from the internet today? From a algorithmically sorted platform, search engine, social media, whatever. So this is, well, 70% maybe something. So all of you have moved today in an information ecosystem that is designed to not provide you with the best, most factually correct information or whatever. It's designed to harvest your attention, right? That is the core design principle of all social media platforms is harvesting attention, packaging it, and selling it. And the core design principle to achieve that is optimizing for engagement. It's not optimizing for truth or relevance or whatever. So the front page of the Times, however flawed it might always have been, is optimized by something that we, in communications research, you would call news factors. So how important is it, how many people are affected by it, and so on. The optimization principle of, say, Facebook or Meta or TikTok or X or whatever, is how many people will interact with this specific piece of content. The more people are likely to interact with it, and that means like it, share it, comment on it, not necessarily click on it. Most of those don't want you to click on it. They want you to stay here and not go away. The thing is, we know from research, and that's well established across various platforms, stuff that engages people, that creates engagement, is stuff that usually is emotionalizing people, and negative emotions work best. So we've created an ecosystem that actively encourages outrage. And everybody here has experienced that, right? How many of you are sometimes in a bad mood after looking at your phone? Yeah, because you're moving in outrage-optimized environments. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how many of you have picked up your phone and 10 minutes later found out that you are doing something with it that you didn't plan to do? So there's lots of intelligent, well-educated people. Why is that? Same for me, by the way, of course. Because the user interfaces, and that's a psychology thing, I'm a psychologist by training, the user interfaces of these devices and of these platforms are designed for frictionless interaction. There's a famous book called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products by a guy who's a psychologist, I'm ashamed to say. And my favorite line from that book is, doing must be easier than thinking. That is what you all do when you pick up your phones, right? There's no correlation between the number of times people use their phones and the reported number of times they use their phones. You don't know how often you use your phone because you use it on autopilot most of the time. The problem is, this is, Daniel Kahneman would say, system one cognition. You're in an automatic, autopilot, associative mode of cognition, and that's where all of our cognitive distortions reside. Like the truth illusion. If you hear something a lot of the time, you will eventually believe it. That is a system one process, an automatic process that you don't control. So you're using your phone in a cognition mode that is receptive to any cognitive distortion there is, and it's optimized for outrage. And that all makes these ecosystems ideal breeding grounds for disinformation, because disinformation doesn't have to stick to pesky stuff like relevance, facts, whatever. It can be outrage and engagement optimized to the absolute limit. And that's what's happening.
Which is...
May I just add to these 2 points? Because I think it's all very well me saying there's multiple truths and novelists present it to the reader and the reader brings their truth to it. But I think it becomes a huge problem when you need consensus in areas like a pandemic or climate change. And now I have a yoga teacher who's a very nice guy, but is also a fascist, which is apparently not a...
Is that compatible?
That's a thing, apparently. There's a book called Fascist Yoga, and he was anti-vaxxer, anti-masks, keep it natural, and all of that. And to this day, his whole, his truth is that, well, I'm not dead. And look at that guy who took the vaccine and got a heart attack at 49. Therefore, therefore, how dare you come to me with your science and all your facts, because my truth is what I live and breathe. And I think that's, I don't know how to get around that, because we do need, all joking aside, we do need things truths that we hold universal. And again, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, written by a bunch of slave owners, right? And yet, so we are able to kind of hold these contradictions there. And I arrived at this also, 7 moons came out of the end of the Sri Lankan war. We all agreed that the war ending was a good thing, 30-year war, but how did it end? And again, multiple narratives. How many civilians were killed? Were they terrorists? Was it our fault? Was it their fault? We're hearing these arguments now. And I put forward the idea, I think in one of the books, I probably got taken out of the draft, but the idea that can we all agree that killing children is wrong? Killing children is a war crime. Killing anyone who does that is morally wrong. And you think that is something everyone can get behind, regardless of your persuasion, but try that argument, and you will go, yeah, okay, you hippie, all good, but... in some certain instances, it's necessary, no one likes to do it. And so I think that's the problem with this idea of truth being nebulous, which I believe it is. How do you, so I guess I'm asking the question, how do you have these universal truths that we can all buy into?
And I want to prod a bit further.
Unless we become fascists.
I want to prod a bit further on your point. We are not all becoming fascists tonight. But I want to prod a bit further, Shehan, and sort of build upon what Christian said, right? That there is a way in which social media or your phone or information ecosystems today are optimized for outrage and are built upon this kind of rejecting the truth with a certain sort of purpose, which is to keep you hooked onto those ecosystems. What then is the purpose of literature today, right? Because your reason behind exposing a multiplicity of truths or narratives is perhaps not, and I hope not, the same as Meta's reason behind keeping somebody hooked to their phone, right? So where does this question of purpose come in? And at a time when we are hooked to our phones, when we're sitting in a non-algorithmic literature festival, what is the purpose of literature in sort of reshaping some of those boundaries and sort of recreating the idea that there can be multiple narratives, but the purpose of those multiple narratives is not to fuel outrage or to sort of fuel alternative truth or to question truth itself?
Well, look, I would love my books to be as addictive as Meta and all of that. So I'm studying those techniques. You want your books to be page turners, you want them, so I'm not higher than any of them. My motives are the same. They make a lot more money than me, but same techniques. And provoking outrage, sometimes that is our purpose as well. Sometimes if there has been injustice that you're writing about. But I don't have an answer for that, because when I'm editing, I'm always trying not to write the propaganda. Because I think if you can see my belief on religion, you could probably infer it from the books, what I feel about religion, but then I think I failed. My idea is that, and that's why you create characters who are different, who have different values. And Marley Almeida was convinced of truths, was convinced that going out and taking these photographs was a worthy cause and gave his life for that cause. No spoiler there, he's dead in the first chapter. But I've often thought, okay, because with Sri Lanka's history, there are multiple narratives, multiple debates that continue going. So, yeah, I don't know whether... okay, you provoke the outrage, you show the alternative views. But beyond that, I think if the novelist steps in and ventures an opinion, then you're writing an opinion piece, you're writing nonfiction, and I feel that's a different side of the street that I don't work on. So I don't know the role of literature, but I do know that you don't put down a book. You pick up a book, you don't put down a book. I've seen my kids when I take the device off them and how feral they get. You put down a book with a feeling of peace and a feeling of thoughtfulness, I believe. Not the same emotion when you put down your phone. So maybe that's something worth promoting, even if it doesn't offer answers. It does offer you that ability to reflect and the ability to see the different viewpoints and maybe even, let's say even, adjust your viewpoint slightly. I'm not saying change your mind, but adjust it slightly.
Do you want to comment on that, Venki?
Yeah, so I think there's a difference between social media. We were talking about what's the difference between social media and writing a novel. I think with a novel, there is an intent on the part of the author to portray something, to portray a point of view or multiple points of view. I think with social media, the content is almost, it's neutral with regard to content. It's irrelevant. The purpose is to, as Christoph pointed out, is to gather attention, to gather information about the customer or the user and so on. And the reason that it's dangerous is that, what is true is a very, very small subset of the entire universe. So there are far more lies. There are far more multiplicity of lies and different kinds of lies than there are actual facts. And so if you're neutral with respect to content, then lies are going to win out, because there are many more of them and many more directions. And so I think just even if you were completely neutral, you would find social media as a vehicle for disinformation and misinformation.
And you're a scientist, and one of the things that scientists get lobbed together with writers is their tendency to live in ivory towers, right? And that science is also an almost pure pursuit, almost like writing is. When you're seeing this play out in front of you, when you see disinformation spread at such a massive scale, when you know that lies win over truth, what keeps your faith in truth alive? You're so passionate about the truth.
Yeah, I think, scientists, not all scientists, some scientists are not very good at communicating, and they're best off just working in the lab or in their sort of office. But those who can really need to communicate as a counterweight, but in doing so, they have to really always make clear, how do we know this? Not, I'm the, belong to the scientific priesthood, and then therefore, statins are okay to take. That's not the way to do it. You have to figure out how to communicate how things work. How did we learn, or with climate change, how do we know climate change is happening? What are the uncertainties? And also to communicate to the public that we live in a world of uncertainty, and we always have to make a decision. Life is uncertain, and we're constantly making decisions. And so we always have to make a decision based on the best evidence we have at the time, and that's a perfectly reasonable way to proceed. And, people argue about evidence. I just want to point out one thing. 50 years ago, photography was evidence. We talked about the Vietnam War and, the napalm photograph and so on. Today, a napalm photograph would not be considered evidence because photography can be faked very easily. So there we've gone from something that was rock solid evidence to something that's no longer evidence. So we have to constantly also ask, what is evidence? And we have to have scientists have a consensus in their field about what is considered evidence and what isn't.
And absolutely, forensics has evolved over time also to sort of consider what is evidence and not. But you scratched at the surface of something that we were definitely going to get to at some point in this conversation, which is around the possibility of manipulation that has been greater than ever before, right? Yeah. And I want to turn to you, Christian, and talk about AI, right? We simply cannot know what is real or artificially generated anymore. How many of you have watched videos on your phone that ask you, is this real or AI? And many of you will scroll through, and I can't tell if a flood happening somewhere in a remote corner of the world is real or has been completely artificially generated to provoke outrage in me, right? It is so realistic today that I can't tell the difference between what is real and AI, even in the video, let alone in what somebody has written. So while we agree that it is important for scientists to communicate more effectively and to be better communicators, what real hope do we have when we are confronted with a volume of information production that is not humanly possible to counter?
Yeah. Well, let me first say something else, if I may. Because this has been spinning around my head now. I talked to a crime writer from Norway earlier. I don't know if you see it, Helen. And it struck me that we are very bad as scientists. We are pretty bad at making our process interesting, right? Most people, as soon as you start talking about methodology, people tend to tune out, right?
That's why they don't pay us as much as football.
Maybe. No, but the thing is, that's what struck me. I mean, I think the most successful form of literature there is about something that is pretty similar to the scientific process, right? I mean, the crime novel, they're evaluating evidence, they're trying to establish facts, there's forensics, there's science. I mean, there's a whole TV series about people who are specialists in blood spatters, so people are actively engaged in following people through this quasi-scientific process, but we somehow haven't got around to that. Maybe someone will write science fiction that is actually closer to the original meaning of the term at some point. The other thing, AI. I'm sorry about this interlude. So, in a way, I think, a colleague of mine in Germany once said, it was possible to lie with pictures before AI, obviously. A picture, even though I agree with you in principle, of course, there's been visual propaganda before the age of AI. And actually, if you look at a lot of the samples that we see in our studies, a lot of the disinformation you see online still is not necessarily AI faked. It's just taken out of context. You see people running down the street, but it's not really in Egypt, it's in Spain 5 years ago. Or you see pictures of bombs hitting a building, but it's really a footage from a computer game. Stuff like that, what we call shadow fakes. People take information, put it in a different context, spin a different narrative, and that is working very well. So you don't need AI to make disinformation. And it's been going on for a long time. We have these perfect disinformation delivery ecosystems now, which is one thing. They had been flooded with content before AI, right? That's why we have these algorithmic sorting systems. I know that the last number I know on this is from 2005. Guess in your head a second, how many minutes of material are uploaded to YouTube globally in 1 minute? Every minute of the day, 24 hours a day. The correct answer is 500 hours. 500 hours of material are uploaded to YouTube. This is something from 2020, which is the last time they reported it, so it's probably more now, whatever. So, of course, the mass of content has been way, way, way too large for quite some time. Now, what AI does is it lowers the marginal cost of creating high-quality looks disinformation. So it's more, I would argue, it's more a quantitative than a qualitative change. All of these problems were there before. Now, just the people who want to lie to you, it's becoming cheaper for them. That's what AI does. And that exacerbates the problem, but I'd still, and of course, Meta, Facebook, Insta, even search engines, all of these are AI, right? We've been using AI daily, all of us, for decades. We just don't call it, it's still machine learning. All of these delivery systems, I think, and their core optimization goals, the way that we shape our public sphere based on how much money can be squeezed out of it, that is the core problem, and AI is just adding drops to the toxic mix.
You know, I hate to tell you that politicians have discovered that it's very cheap to lie to you and you don't need expensive GPUs or AI for quality or quantity.
but
And
this is
I
a
will
real
say
good
mea
point.
culpa. But I was going to say exactly to you, Shehan.
No, so I'm just expanding on this. I realize if you go before photography, the written word, you'd have a correspondent going to the Crimean War, the Boer War, and filing handwritten. And again, I'm sure that was like the Times of India front page. That was the truth from the front lines. But again, I'm sure that person could have been a fiction writer or could have been peddling some agenda. So this is not a new idea, and photographs being taken out of context and all of that. But I'd like to think that perhaps the lie gets found out eventually. Maybe it takes a century, hopefully not that long, but the lie eventually gets found
But
out.
I want to push against that, right? Because we had a brief conversation about what does it do to conviction when all of these systems we held as sacred come crumbling, right? Mali Almeida believes that his photographs will make a difference. What if he knows that they won't make a difference? Maybe he believes that a video will make a difference. What if he knows the video doesn't make a difference, right? What happens to any of us when we lose conviction that anything we do matters because we're so overwhelmed by everything that's happening around us? What does a character like that look like? What do we look like?
So Mali Almeida, it was interesting for me to write because he was born in the 50s, living in the 80s. So that boomer generation, that post-independence generation who believed they could change the world. I came a generation later. We had no conviction. Kurt Cobain killed himself when we were 19, and from then on, there was no hope, there was no truth, we were nihilistic, and you look at that generation, there were not many activists in the 90s among our generation, because we thought this war will go on forever, and nothing will change. But thankfully, the kids are a bit more idealistic, have more conviction than, because if you look at, fast forward to 2022, the Aragalaya, that great movement that toppled the government, that was helmed not by, I was sitting and watching TV with my friends, cracking beer, going, look at these crazy kids, what are they doing? But the kids were out there in the front lines believing that, let's get rid of all these old men and women, I have to say, small minority, this generation that's destroyed, these two parties that have destroyed the country. And so, hopefully they don't reach my age and lose that conviction, and I think the challenges are rife because of all these techniques and multiple truths and the fact that AI gets more and more insidious. But so I would say, yeah, our generation was famous for our lack of conviction, but maybe, and we always push again. Also, I think humans are contrarian by nature. So even if you present a universal truth, there'll be someone out there trying to disprove it just to make a name for themselves or just to be contrarian. And I think
But I think that's actually what often drives science forward, is to, if you disprove the consensus, you become much more famous than if you simply add to the consensus.
Correct.
So I think that's not a bad thing, actually.
No, I don't think so. And if something cannot be disproved, then perhaps we've stumbled on something that's true.
Yeah.
So there is hope, I believe.
So science is outrage optimized as well, in a way.
So science is outrage optimized as well.
So smatting the paradigm is the way to the Nobel.
So in an outrage optimized world where the truth seems further away than it ever has, what we can rest easy knowing is that conviction does still exist and that hope still does exist. And even the naysayers who might be fighting against the truth might one day end up supporting the truth rather than undermining it. And on that note, I want to thank all three of you. Before we move on to questions, can we have a loud round of applause for all three of them? So what a phenomenal panel. We have around 7 minutes for questions. So I'm going to start taking questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and I will get a mic to you. The gentleman with the cap there, can we get a mic to him, please? If you could keep your questions brief, please, I will be very, very grateful.
To recall, flashback to Nazi Germany, Joseph Goebbels, if you repeat a lie often enough, it will soon be accepted as the truth. Any panelist would like to comment?
Well, I've told you the psychological technical term for this is the truth illusion, and that's, of course, unfortunately, Goebbels was right in this. I mean, he's basically, in many ways, he's written the book on on the darkest side of propaganda. And the thing is, and this is a general pattern, a lot of what cognitive and social psychology have actually found out about, or scientifically established more like, about persuasion, was intuitively known to propagandists long before scientists got around to showing that it's actually true. But yes, that's the truth illusion is one of the biggest problems I think that we have right now. It's too easy to manipulate us, especially with the ecosystems that we move in.
No, that's a great quote. I've heard variations on that spoken in Sri Lanka. If you tell a lie 100 times, it becomes truth. Or if you have a lie that enough people believe in your lie, it becomes truth. And the fact is that's a very effective way of winning elections, and it's been in practice. Yeah.
I would say that's one area where science differs. Science is not a democracy, and you could have a vast majority of scientists believing something, and all it takes is one person to come up with a definitive experiment showing that it's wrong, and you don't have to believe, it's not a popularity contest. So I think, again, I think perhaps in the world of science, ideally anyway, it could be.
Isn't that the big elephant in the room now? We're talking about climate change, where surely this has to be indisputable and action is needed, but again, you're having summits where nations are not attending these summits because apparently this is negotiable truth, and I think...
Yeah, but that's because of what Christoph said about playing on doubt, because all of these measurements have certain uncertainties built into them, and those who work in the field know how to evaluate the uncertainties and know what the probabilities are. But if you're a propagandist, you can amplify the uncertainties and create doubt in people's minds, and that's...
So, I mean, either the truth tellers have to be much more persuasive and charming, or we have to be fascists, and climate fascists, and just push it forward. Those are the options. Yeah.
Sorry, we have another question at the back there. The gentleman, after that lady in pink. Yes. If you can get a mic to them, please. The one who's standing up. Over here.
Good evening, panelists. My name is Abhimanyu Amarkant, and I'm a final year student of political science. My question was that I agree with the point of conviction and us not becoming fascists, but it is often seen that when these ecosystems and the establishment that represents truth, when the public becomes disillusioned with it, we become very vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, fascists come to power. And a historical example would be Nazi Germany. Disillusionment with the Weimar Republic is what allowed the Nazis to come to power. So how do we protect ourselves in that phase of vulnerability and still be grounded in conviction and not get swayed in the waves of populism when we are disillusioned with the truth?
Yeah. Can I say something?
Easy question.
It's an easy question. No, I do have an answer to that. So I think if you, I'm not naming names, but if you look at the people who find the truth is in their way to political power, an absolutely regular pattern is for them to attack the processes of establishing facts. And that is something and I have to say this now, we see in the US right now. Right? Okay, we have a president who is actively attacking science and who is actively attacking journalism. As soon as he starts attacking inspectors who solve murders, basically he's attacked all the systems that we have to establish facts. So, that gives you the answer. If you have, the thing that we have to do is defend the institutions that defend the processes that we've developed over millennia to establish facts. The process is the most important thing. Falsifiability, all of that. Hearing the other side, trying to get as much evidence as possible, checking the facts. So as long as we try to defend the processes and the institutions that are there to defend those processes, I think we're on the right track.
Hi, I'm Dr. Arpita Sen. I'm a doctor, HR, and an author myself. So I have a very simple and a very easy question. Can there be multiple versions of truth? And if yes, how do we distinguish between half-truths and not truths?
Multiple versions of truth. Venki, you have a very strong opinion on this.
Favorite topic.
I think that truth can often be an ideal that you approach as you collect evidence, but I really don't believe in sort of multiple versions of truth. Truth can be complex. It can have many facets to it, but multiple versions implies that there are two versions that are somewhat in opposition to each other. And I simply don't, at least as far as the real world goes, I just don't accept that.
Shehan is a half-truth peddler.
I am a half-truth peddler, but I would like to believe in, so we did establish, we believe in statins, we believe in climate change, right? So we have some, but yeah, this is to the previous question, I think it can work the other way. Sri Lankan example, there was profound disillusionment with the two established parties, and that manifested in a wide protest movement and in a rout at the polls. And so you can expose lies, and these were two parties of privilege peddling lies for decades. And these got exposed, and now, depending on who you talk, again, you talk to people in Colombo, you'll get many different opinions on it. But my fear is now that if this government shits the bed, and then again, the whole process will start again, that the lies will be start peddling, and again, watch out for those minorities, watch out for the Tamil Tigers are coming back, and we've heard this all again. So it's a dangerous, and it works both ways. But I would like to believe in some universalities, and I think maybe the falsifiability is the main tool. If it's something, you've tried to falsify it and it stands up, then maybe that's one thing that we can believe in.
And Christian, the last word. How do you distinguish between...
The thing is, I've been thinking about this since our conversation before, with the multiple truth things. I think there's at least one arena where, so I'm a scientist, so I believe in the scientific process, but the scientific process helps me not very much when I have an argument with my wife. This sounds funny, but it's, I think in the arena of human relationships, and I don't want to stretch this too far, but in a way, sort of war is the most extreme form of human relationships going wrong there is. In that arena, there is one truth, and only one truth is a problematic point of view. Because and that's, I think, what literature can do. It can, by making different viewpoints available, it builds a bridge to possible consensus. If I don't understand your point of view, your truth, multiple truths, maybe truth is the wrong term, but your point of view, then I will not be able to reach reconciliation. So maybe that multiple truth thing is something for the way we talk to each other, and less for, is our planet getting warmer?
Once again, I'm getting very loud warning signs on the screen in front of me, but another loud round of applause for a spectacular opening session to the Literature Live Mumbai Literature Festival. Thank you to all three of you, and to our amazing audience here, and to the NCPA and the festival for this panel.